Welcome back to the Context Coaching Podcast. We are joined today by Anthony Santos, who is the associate head coach at Cal State Fullerton, making the third Titan appearance on this show. Coach, appreciate you being on.
Appreciate you having me, man.
So let's dive in. Coach, can you take us through your background in coaching? How did you get into this whole endeavor? What jobs have you had throughout that time? And how did we land where we are now as the associate head coach of the Fullerton Titans?
Well, it kind of started out, I coached high school. I coached high school at my alma mater, Bosco Tech, to start, and I was there for 4 years, and I decided I wanted a different challenge. At the time, I was obviously going to school here at Fullerton, and my head coach at the high school that I worked at was an alum from here. And so he kind of connected the dots with some of the staff and kind of became a manager. And that manager role kind of took its own toll. Obviously, I had played a little bit. I have some coaching. I have an understanding of the behind the scenes stuff. And so I had a really good relationship with the staff to where they trusted me not only on the floor from a manager standpoint, but did a little bit of video, did some ops stuff just to kind of help assist. And after that first year, I really didn't know what to go and expect. I was wiping sweat. Like, man, I did not like that. There was times I was practicing. But after that first year, I realized like, okay, like what else can I do? And I ended up coming back as the director of ops, and at the same time being a grad student. And so obviously, taking on a lot of different responsibilities, still going to school full time, trying to get my master's, and then the whole ops thing. And, I'm sure you know how that goes. It's a lot of responsibility. Everything falls on your shoulders. And so those first 2 years was very eye-opening. That third year, that's when Coach Taylor came. And so, yes, now I'm talking about 3 head coaches in my first 3 years. And I didn't know him. He's literally, I still remember his first meeting with the team before his press conference was, hey, you look familiar. We can connect later. And I was like, there's no way I look familiar. But a couple of people connected the dots. And he actually was at Arizona State. And when I was coaching high school, we played Sarah. And they had a kid that he was recruiting. And so he came to our gym and I met him. So that's where we met. No relationship or anything, but that's just where we met. And I will say this, the first half of his year here as the head coach, man, he did not trust me. He did not trust me. I was part of the old regime, me and our video guy, Aaron Lawrence. And literally we just kept our head to the ground and stayed quiet and just got whatever we needed to get done. And then literally halfway through the year, I want to say during the winter break, he figured out like, oh man, we need these 2 dudes. And that's kind of where we more so myself, Aaron doesn't coach anymore, but more so myself, that's where I kind of, laid the foundation with him, being the director of ops the next couple of years, then bumping up to being an assistant. And then now, like with how you introduced me, the associate head coach. And it's funny, nothing has changed. If anything, I feel like I'm taking on more just because, whatever it takes to win. That's kind of always been how I go by, how I work by, how I live by, just whatever it takes. And sometimes it may not fall under my job description, but if it falls on my desk, like that's what I got to take care of.
Well, I want to touch on something right off the bat because I feel that, especially at your level, the path that you took, similar to mine, is not the usual one, right? So it's normally player, GA, whatever, coach, and we both got our start as managers, worked our way into assistant coaching roles, and then whatever the path was from there. Can you talk a little bit about the impact that managers can have on programs, number one, and 2, how starting in that role and then going to ops role prepared you for whatever other jobs that you would inhabit across athletics in general? Because I think often a lot of things get delegated out, especially in bigger staffs, that in smaller staffs, people have to take care of all that stuff. But ultimately, how did those roles inform your mindset now as you go through this new role and how you have to think about program as a whole?
Yeah, no, managers are super, super impactful. I mean, they do everything, obviously from a practice setup to a miscellaneous. And I understood the practice setup, the game setup, and then the miscellaneous stuff kind of just started to come at me. And I was like, man, like this, I didn't know I signed up for this stuff. And now they're looking at you like if this doesn't get done from a manager standpoint, like now that's an assumed responsibility. And so I kind of learned that. And obviously I knew I wanted to coach. And so I took it on, not like, oh, it's another task I have to do, but more so it's allowing me to be on the ground level and see the inner workings of what goes on. And even our managers now, like I think they're the hardest workers in our program. And they bring something, we cycle through managers and they all bring something different. And I try to have a great relationship with them because as a coach, I know I'm probably going to ask them for help with certain things. I'm going to give them responsibilities like I was given. And so I try to have a relationship with them. And at the same time, I also try to coach them up, and some guys, they want to become coaches. Some guys, they want to do, work from an analytics standpoint. And so just try to give them feedback and what helps us. Because at the end of the day, I don't want to give them just tedious work that I'm not going to use. It's just something to look at. Like, no, I want something that applies to what it is that we're doing. And then even moving forward, going to the ops role, it was more responsibility because I had to delegate now. I had to make sure coaches got whatever they needed, whether I did it myself or where I asked the manager to help me out with it. But from a operations standpoint, I mean, you got to know practices, you got to know meals, you got to know schedules and booking flights for coaches and just being super, super detail oriented. So I've dropped the ball my fair share of times, but especially in my role now, I could just be around. And if something is off, I could just point to our ops like, hey, this is coming. You got to make sure you handle it. And it's just an awareness thing. You've done it so much for so long that it just clicks. This time of the year, this needs to happen. This time of the year, this needs to happen. And I guess that's probably the benefits of being a student and having, now working at Fullerton. I know all the inner workings of what goes on around here.
Yeah. Can you do me a favor and zoom out a little bit, and maybe for people that haven't been in the college atmosphere, describe how those roles shake out to a certain degree, right? Because you have your head coach, then the NCAA allows you to have whatever number of assistants, and then there's an ops position, and some schools have a video coordinator, and then there's managers. But like, how does that, as you've seen it play out throughout the league and even at your place, like how are those designed, number one, and what roles do they play, and how do they enhance or maybe even sometimes restrict program because maybe there's too many people?
You're talking about from an operations standpoint or staffing standpoint?
Yeah, just in general, like, because right, I know what you're talking about, but some people might not, right? So when you talk about what the ops position, what is that? Like director of operations, right? What is that related to? Now you're the associate head coach, or you were before an assistant coach, right? And how kind of the hierarchy of what the NCAA allows and how you guys are staffed and what each, like some people can go out on the road and recruit, some people can be on the court and coach, and some people can't, right? How does that all shake out, and how have you seen that evolve over your 10, 15 years there?
Yeah, I think well, obviously the head coach, so Coach Taylor's vision, how he wants the staff to operate, how he wants the director of ops, what we like, you have to know your expectations first. Expectations, responsibilities, and then I think that starts to set the precedent and the trickle down of what guys do. Like for me, just because of, I guess, my organization and how connected I am, and I've been here for a while, like the one thing I always want to get rid of is scheduling, because it's a year-long thing, and for me, as much of a pain in the ass as it can be, because you're dealing with other people and their circumstances, I love to be able to communicate with coaches and have that type of relationship. So there's certain things, certain knacks that guys just kind of find their way into, and that's their thing. And it's always different. So our staff breakdown, there's coaches that normally have like a special teams, and whether it's a pressing, they're in charge of their press defense, they're underneath and side out of bounds. Coaches have an offensive coach, a defensive coach. Coach Taylor, he lets us do everything. Now one of our assistants, he's taking on the role of our underneath out of bounds stuff. And so he's solely in charge of that. He makes the call, and I'm in charge of our change up defense, our 1-3-1. And so there's a lot of different things that we take on. And then obviously when you talk about the director of operations, in my opinion, he's the guy that connects the dots. He's the guy that makes stuff happen. He's the eyes and the ears to what maybe we don't see. And yes, he may not be able to be on the floor right now, but once again, it's the vision of the head coach. Do you want a director of operations who is more admin oriented, or do you want someone that wants to be a coach? And for us, the guys that we've had is guys that always want to be coaches. And I think that's by design, because they see and they interact with our players and the staff differently, because they have a different viewpoint. They may not have the loudest voice on the floor, but they see things. And so just to be able to communicate that, whether it's in a staff meeting, whether it's to individual assistants, whether that's to players, just that connectedness with a guy that's in the operations role. Because I think just over time, director of operations, they have a relationship with players that's different from the coaches, because us as coaches, we're coaching them. We're telling them things they probably don't want to hear, at times, and so on and so forth. The operations guy, they're dealing with their food. And so it's almost like they're working for them. And so there's basically a built-in relationship. And I think that's big. And I'll even say, from my transition from the ops role to the assistant role, my relationship, like even now, has changed with the guys. And I've noticed it, and I'm okay with it, but I also have to know that the relationship is what we stand on. And so I've tried to be better in terms of getting guys in my office, watching film, talking about, what it is that's going on off the floor. Whereas I felt as a director of ops, I just, that just came my way no matter what, because I was always problem solving for those guys. And so hopefully that answers it. I think the direction is changing a little bit in terms of staffing and who can go out recruit, who can be on the floor. I think the NCAA is changing up some rules to where, if a coach is out recruiting, then maybe an ops or somebody else can kind of step in and take on more of a role coaching wise. To be honest, I don't pay attention to that stuff. I go about my job here, and I do the best that I can do here. And whatever rule changes come, I just adapt, and when I was in ops, it didn't matter. Like I was trying to find a way to handle all the operation stuff, and then, okay, practice is here. What can I do to contribute to practice?
Right.
And in my opinion, and maybe because I've never been a part of a high major staff or a big staff, I like small staffs. Because it makes you do everything. You know what's going on, versus if I'm just a coach, I'm just coaching and recruiting, and like I probably have no relationship with the guy. So obviously it adds a lot to the plate to just deal with our guys. And not that our guys are bad, but just their academics, their family stuff, their girlfriend stuff. It's just a lot of different things that go on in our guys' lives.
I have a question that's two-parter, but with the same theme. So what is the best thing you do in your program that creates the largest ripple effect in your culture that, should you leave, you would take with you? But I'd also like to know, what is something that was going on before DT got there that has remained as a through line all the way up until now, that, we didn't jettison completely, but it was like, hey, this was something we were doing and it's kind of held on. And then this is something we've done since the beginning, since Coach Taylor got here. And then this is how we've evolved now, especially with Jay Wells coming in for a little bit and kind of being a consultant. Like, how have you seen that evolution. So are there a couple things you could share that maybe other people could think about and borrow, air quote,
Yeah.
steal and apply?
Yeah, I think something that I would take with us, wherever I'm at, is just the work part, like the sweat equity with the guys. Obviously I want to become a head coach. Like I'm big on having, I'd be big on having like a young staff. And people say, well, you don't have any head coaching experience. Like, well, the sweat equity that we put in with our guys is just the work. Like, I was an ops, I was a manager, I'm an assistant now. Like, I still want to be able to have that those real conversations and talk about on the floor how we can help improve. So I think that's something that's big, because we've always talked about the work, and our hashtag is develop you. That's been a big thing for us, something that we've always been before Coach Taylor now. And I think probably, I mean, that's all I know is our guard play. We have, in my opinion, one of the best guard play year in, year out in our league, whether it's guys that transfer in, whether it's guards that we develop. At the end of the day, like Cal State Fullerton is big on guards, and just the impact that guards have on the game. I think the whole NCAA in general, like it's a lot of guards. Now I think it's shifted to where you have to have some bigs, and so now we have to find bigs that fit us. But we've always been guard oriented. We've always had big, strong, physical guards, and that's always been our advantage.
What would you say, if you could dial it in, contributes to that being part of your identity, that we have strong guard play? What are the things that the program focuses on that has made that a consistent theme throughout, regardless of what the rest of the roster looks like?
Our spacing. I think spacing is the biggest thing, to be good, like to be a multifaceted guard and work in space, knowing that you have guys that can dribble, pass, and shoot, only opens up the floor for yourself. So if we're on a team and me and you both can dribble, pass, and shoot, there may be a night that I go off, and then there may be a night that you go off, but we all work hand in hand. And for us, now for the most part, I want to say D's been here 10 years. 8 of those years, we've always had 4 guards in the lineup, basically, in our starting lineup. And so it just puts pressure on other teams to have to defend us. Versus, some teams, they play 2 bigs. Yes, that's a disadvantage for us, but on the other end, they also got to guard us. And so it's just the game planning. But obviously multifaceted guards that can dribble, pass, and shoot, and then just the spacing and pace.
How have you seen the program change in the last couple of years, specifically post-COVID? Are there things that, as you zoom out and you move into this new role, that are identifiable as like, yo, hey, this was something that we've now put behind us, and this is where our focus and energy is, and it's been transformational for us?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is recruiting. Recruiting has changed. It started to change obviously before COVID, because the transfer portal was coming on board, and then COVID hit, and literally you're dealing with kids that have been out of school, or not really out of school, but just that extra COVID year that the NCAA allowed everybody. And so there's a lot of different things that, if you have to do your work, otherwise you don't know what you're getting in terms of a player. And obviously we always character and all that type of stuff. But from a recruiting standpoint, we can recruit a higher level earlier in terms of high school kids, because some schools, they're just literally waiting for the portal, and they're straight portal. And we had to do a lot of that this past year. We have 9 new guys. I don't even know. We have 4 freshmen, 2 junior college guys, and the rest are all portal guys, whether it's D2 or D1 or grad transfers. And so to sift through that, man, it's tough, because at the end of the year, everyone is hitting up the same kids. Or even in the beginning of the year, there's a kid that we feel is perfect for our level, but he's getting hit up by high majors.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's the mix of, well, who can we get? Who's searching for the right fit, or who's searching for that higher level
Mm-hmm.
that may not fit them. And so
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's the hardest part right now. And in recruiting, you can be like, you have to target your guys early, high school wise,
Mm-hmm.
and go after them hard. And you know, obviously it's going to be a battle, because some of those other schools at our level are going for those same guys.
Mm-hmm.
And in my opinion, I feel like some high majors kind of slow down the process for us.
Yep.
Because they'll stay in contact, but they haven't offered, or they're not really serious, or they're a third tier guy for them, but they're a tier one guy for us.
Right.
And so it kind of slows it down. So you have to be able to have a list of guys that you know you want.
Yeah.
And kind of work backwards from that. So I think that's been the biggest thing post COVID that we've all kind of had to deal with and adapt. And now they got obviously the one-time transfer. Like, there's just so many rules from a recruiting standpoint. And now they're talking about changing the calendar. And it's like, man, just tell me the days we can go out.
Hey, good players adjust, coach.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you want to be a head coach. And so this is a question that you may or may not be able to answer at this point, but what would you change as the head coach? Or more importantly, what would change for you, right, in regards to that? So this is the hat I'm wearing. This is the one I want to wear. But as you think about it, what would change other than, all right, you have a different title?
And this is one thing that I've always had trouble with, is just trusting others, like delegating. It's the hardest thing, you know, as a manager, as an ops, I've always been hands-on. As an assistant, even now as an associate head coach, like I mentioned earlier, there's no difference. I know more. I've done more. I have more experience in certain areas. But to let go of literally everything. Like, I've done gear since day one. I make sure our staff looks good. You know, we're all matching, whatever it is. Like, now I got to rely on somebody else to make those decisions, man. And like, it's funny, but I'm very serious. Like, it's hard, the gear, the scheduling, like to make sure you obviously, you know, you have your staff, you're all on the same page. And sometimes being on the same page isn't good enough. Being on the same page, on the same line, on the same word, so that way we all have that synergy with one another. You know, I thought our staff before, myself, Coach Taylor, Danny Sprinkle, John Smith, like, we had been together for so long that we knew each other like that. We knew our strengths, our weaknesses, and it was a whole deal, to where, you know, sometimes now you don't get that. You know, D probably mentioned, you know, we've had so many staff changes. And so it's hard nowadays. It's like recruiting. You don't know what you're getting. You know, people tell you all the good stuff, and then whether you're recruiting or staff, then you hear all the other stuff. And it's like, why didn't I find that out before? Why do I have to wait to go through what I'm going through to now figure this out? So I think, you know, that's an important thing. So just having guys to trust and that fall under my same belief, I think is a big thing. And that's something that, you know, me and Coach have talked about. He's been really, really good in terms of helping our staff develop, helping me develop, and talking about certain things. And so, yeah, that's probably the one area that I know is going to be pressing.
Yep. Well, I'm sure you've seen this, and I'm sure you're experiencing it, is the right word I'm looking for now, more in your role, as you get more dumped on your plate and you're figuring out how to let some things go. I joke about this all the time. You know, for Coach Taylor, probably 15% of what he actually does is basketball related. Mm-hmm. You know, and 85% of it is managing program and dealing with administration and things that have nothing to do with what happens between the lines. And I'm sure you're getting a little taste of that now as you move up the proverbial ladder, where it's like, it started, I'm all about the basketball, and now it's like, wait, where'd that go? So how have you seen that evolve, and how have you adapted to that? And how or what, as you've experienced that, would you say is something you've changed your mind on relative to what you used to think? right? Like I used to think this, and I'm behind the curtain now, and I'm over here, and here's why.
Yeah. I want to say, in previous years, just to that last question, I've always tried to fix things, right? And now, because you're dealing with admin, you're dealing with the X's and O's, and you want to deal with more X's and O's than the admin stuff. I'm kind of more of, let's just make sure whatever we need, whatever it is that we need works. Don't try and fix everything. Because if you try and fix everything, you're just going to be pissed because more stuff needs to be fixed. Like, let's make sure our hoops are right, the clock runs, there's air in the ball, we're wearing the right jerseys, like literally that, like that's all that, like if when we go to practice tomorrow, I just want to make sure that our guys show up to the floor. Now, do they have the right shorts? Whatever. I don't, before it used to be like so detailed, and now it's like, don't fight that stuff because it's only going to create more stress and more things for you to do that doesn't necessarily lead to winning all the time. Like it was a small thing that we have never talked about that I felt like I had to be on, and we've slowly got off it because it's not like a huge deal. But when D first got here, he always wanted white socks and gray undershirts, like under practice jerseys all the time. And now we don't even talk about, like, just make sure they're Nike. They could be black, they could be white. I don't care what undershirt you have, just make sure it's Nike. But I get it. I get it 100%. Don't fight the battles that aren't going to help you win games. Now, there's going to be battles that you do need to fight, and the battles change year to year, whether it's scheduling, whether it's budget, that type of stuff. Like, okay, let's fight for that. Stuff that we need for our program. Let's fight for that. That's stuff that matters. Banners, hanging banners in our gym. And it's not necessarily for me, but for the guys that come back every year.
Yeah. The
guys that we're recruiting to be here for the next 4 years.
Yeah.
They want to see that stuff because you go into all these other gyms and they have that stuff. And probably to go back and answer myself, or maybe answer a question you may have, we didn't have a basketball banner that said we went to the tournament, 2 in the last 4 years or 4 years total. We just got one up like a week ago. And so those are the small things that we fight for, but we're fighting for it because it's for our guys.
Yeah.
Like, stuff that impacts our guys is the stuff that we fight for. And so as long as we prioritize that stuff, and I tell D all the time, like, he gets mad about whatever's going on, I'll be like, man, like, that's fine. Who cares? Like, let's just get on to the next play. So I just let him complain, and then we get on to the next one.
Yeah. So traditionally, I would say coaches are generally looking to find ways to get better, and then studying other coaches, studying other teams, generally probably just basketball. And I always ask this question, what have you learned watching other teams that aren't basketball? But you guys had a unique situation last year where, mid-season or whenever Jay started working with you, you had an outside consultant come in and spend some time with your guys. What did you learn as not the guy in the driver's seat, but being close, right, to the director's chair? What were your takeaways from that, and what has stayed with you from that, even though I don't think you're spending as much time as you did last year in direct contact?
Yeah, no, a guy like Jay Wells, it's funny. I loved it because that's actually what I got my master's in. And so I understand that aspect, and it was great because.
And do me a favor, you and I know what we're talking about, but the guests don't. Give a little background to what we're talking about.
Jason Wells, like a performance coach from a mental aspect, not necessarily the X's and O's, but the stuff that drives us, our players, our staff individually, to then be able to bring us together as a group, and just having a collective purpose, a goal, a sense of togetherness, to where we can fall back on what we've established as a team off the court. I thought Jay Wells did a great job with that last year. This year, like, we have stuff we fall back on, stuff that we talk about. But a guy like him coming in and being able to be the voice that isn't always heard. Like, our guys know him. Our guys have seen him, met him, talked with him, texted with him, but he's not the voice that's coaching them. Like, he could care less about the coaching aspect of it. You know, he points out things that he sees from us to them and them to us. Like, I'm not afraid to share it, but he challenged me the way I talk to our guys.
Share that. Talk about that in depth so that coaches that are listening can look themselves in the mirror.
Yeah, I've always been an intense guy on the floor, off the floor. You know, if we teach something, we talk about something, we drill it. Like, I'm the type of guy, you need to know that. And if you don't know that, boom, it gives me reason to get after you. He saw that probably within the first 2-3 days of us like working with our group last year. And he challenged me in front of our staff, you know, just the way I go about coaching, the way I go about teaching, communicating with our guys. If I'm communicating at an 8, 9, and 10 every day, how am I going to communicate on a 2, 3, 4? Like, they understanding the tones, how it's heard, what's being said. And so the energy that our guys have, like, to be more aware of that stuff. And like last night's game, for example, the energy, I didn't really like the energy with our staff. And I just told coach, hey, coach, you got to go change the energy in that huddle. And literally, instead of us huddling right away during a timeout, I sent him in there and he did his deal. And then we got back out and we convened about what it is that we want to do offensively, defensively. And then he got back in and we kept it moving. And so I think just being able to have an awareness from that standpoint, I think, is big, because a lot of teams, they may not utilize a consultant like Jay Wells is for us. But it's important to know what's going on with your team, not always from a basketball aspect. There's stuff that may have happened, you know, outside the floor or whatever's going on school wise. And so just to have a pulse on that type of stuff, I think, is huge. And Jay Wells has allowed for our staff to be better communicators just to our guys in general.
Yeah, for sure. No, and I appreciate you sharing that, because I think at the end of the day, we live in this fantasy world as coaches where, hey, whatever's with you should stop at the door and we can just focus on basketball and then you go back to your lives. And that's not the reality of the space. And that's not the reality of human beings. There's very few people in the world that are elite compartmentalizers where everything is put in its box, right? There's always going to be bleed over. And you know, what you're sharing there is him challenging you. Hey, they're bringing stuff in, and you can't always be at a 10 when they're at a 2, right? How do you get to find that fluctuation and that balance where you can meet them where they are? And I think that's great for all of us to understand. I think it's also important what you said is he challenged you in front of the team, and he challenged them in front of the team, in front of the coaches, right? And how do you have an opportunity as a team where one of the things Jason always shares is the relationship has to be strong enough to bear the weight of the truth, right? And so how are you creating that opportunity as a collective unity, a collective group, to have those moments? So thanks for sharing that. I'm going to bring it back to one more thing, and then we are going to close shop for the day. And I think what I want to know from you is that as you have seen the 10-year evolution of Coach Taylor and yourself, what are the things that you can point to and say, I'm lucky to be around this man because of X and the evolution that you have seen? And at the same time, where are the areas that you would like to see us take it one step further?
Us as in?
The staff. Right? Because again, you said you were with 3 head coaches in 3 years. DT came in, didn't trust you in year 1. You had to earn that. But over 10 years, you've seen a couple you've seen the evolution, right? As he grows as a coach, as a father, as a brother, as a person, right? All these things. Where can you point to and say, yo, man, I'm lucky to be around this guy because this is what I have seen the growth and where it has had a direct impact on me and our athletes. And this is where I'd like to see us move the needle one step further.
Yeah, I think his growth, he's always been a great relationship guy. But to be around a guy that you can be with on the floor, in the offices joking, on the golf course, out having dinner, like he's a guy that he's always been about the people that, that are here with us, especially our staff. When guys come into town, Sprinkle, when he's in town recruiting, like we always make it a point to just make sure we get together. In the off season, like John Smith, he's in our league. We go up to we go up to SLO to play golf, and he's always about just the people that we've built in that relationship. Like you can't take that from us. Where I think we can continue to grow and get better. I always feel like guys, and I think we've gotten a ton better this year, and I think a lot of that is attributed to Jay Wells, is the relationship that we have with our guys, and them understanding what it is and why. So guys in the past, we've always told them the truth. The truth hurts sometimes, right? And yes, we have a relationship with them, but I feel like because of COVID, because of guys like Jay Wells, we've set aside time to talk more about the game, to talk more about life. Whereas I don't know if we did so much of that in the previous years. We were always great to be around. Guys were sometimes, hard to coach. There's always those guys. And they always leave here like, man, we could have done this, could have done that. But then they come back and realize like, man, you guys were right. So the relationship was different. It's changed for them. And a lot of it is, their maturity. They've been out playing pro. And so they've seen what it is that we're trying to teach them. Fast forward to now and hopefully continue to build and grow it. Like we're talking about that stuff now. To where there isn't so much fluctuation. Like I think our guys now, we can have a staff meeting with an individual player. We can have one-on-one meetings and we can call each other out on certain things and it be taken a lot more willingly than it probably would have been received in previous years. But it's because we have conversations over and over and over. And once again, it's the truth. We're us as coaches, we're trying to win and we're trying to help you win and be successful in their roles. And sometimes, their roles aren't what they envision. And something that Jay Wells has always talked about is your role this year is not the role that you're going to play next year. It's not your role every year is going to change. And so just being able to have those real conversations to where they're received better. I think our staff now does a great job of making sure those messages are received better. And I think we have to continue to do that because a lot of these kids now, whether they're transfers, whether they're part of that COVID era, they've dealt with a lot. And they've gotten away with a lot. There's this whole mental health stuff now. And so being able to decipher, what's what and how to really have an impact on them on and off the floor is an area I think us as coaches are growing in. And I think that's a benefit for us having a small staff, 3 head coach, 3 assistants, a director of ops. And I think that's where we need to continue to be better because if, we're obviously talking about winning games and just winning in life, like you have to be able to do those things.
Yeah. It's one of the things that I think as I zoomed out a little bit from just on the floor to administrative role, where I talk a lot about the value of athletics. And we talk a lot about how sports are a vehicle to teach leadership, followership, and to learn to be part of something bigger than yourself. And ultimately, as you mentioned, as these guys get out there in the real world and life, and that's what life's about, right? How are you part of something bigger than yourself? And how are you playing the role that you're being asked to play? And it's great that you have now, in your words, as I heard you, taken to being very intentional about those conversations versus it just evolving as part of them playing. And I think that's great. If somebody was so inclined and wanted to reach out to you or follow along with Develop You, where could they find you?
They can email me, ansantos@fullerton.edu. I do not want to give my phone number. They can get that, or they can follow me on Twitter. I guess DM me at coach_A Santos on Twitter. Probably the two best ways to get a hold of me. Don't call my office line because I have 12 voicemails that have not been listened to for a couple months.
That sounds like me. I've taken my office line off of every published source on the planet because I just rather them call my cell or but anyway, I appreciate taking the time, Coach. It's been fun. Looking forward to seeing you when you guys get up closer to the northern area.
Yes, sir. Appreciate it.